I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People podcast by JPPI. On Saturday night, Jews around the world will gather around their seder tables to retell the story of the Exodus, the journey that the ancient Israelites made from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light. We read the same ancient words. In every generation, we must see ourselves as if we personally came out of Egypt. But this year, once again, these words feel heavy. As we dip parsley into salt water, ask the 4 questions, break the matzah, there are still 59 hostages, 24 living hostages who will not be at home around their family's seder table. Their absence is a wound that cuts through every home, every Jewish home, and every Jewish heart. Their captivity, now almost 18 months in, is a chilling reminder that the story of bondage and liberation is not just history, it's present. Israel is still at war, families are still shattered, and yet the Haggadah commands us to speak of hope, to believe in redemption, to demand freedom. Today we're joined by a person who knows that commandment intimately. Rachelle Sprecher-Fraenkel became a voice of courage and moral clarity during one of Israel's darkest moments. In 2014, her teenage son Naftali was one of 3 teens kidnapped and murdered in the West Bank by Hamas. Since then, she has become a symbol not just of resilience, but of deep humanity and unshakable faith, even in the face of the greatest loss possible. Together, we talk about what it means to celebrate Pesach, Passover, when freedom is still far away for so many people. How do we hold on to joy when people are still in chain, when people are still suffering, when people are still in sorrow? And how do we keep telling the story of redemption when there are people who are not redeemed? And what does this mean this year out of all years? Stay with us. Rachelle, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's great to have you. And the reason I really wanted to speak with you right before Pesach, before the holiday, Passover, is because this is not the first one that Israelis and Jews around the world are celebrating and marking ever since October 7th and hostages being held in Gaza. But as this war does drag on, and still as we're recording this, unless there's some last minute miracle, 59 hostages, 24 of them alive, still being held in the Gaza Strip. And I'm curious your thoughts. How should people be marking this, right? Chag Cherut, the holiday of freedom, of liberation, is not exactly that this year.
Yeah, I had this moment with my daughter. Actually, it was towards the end of last year, where she was in tears, frustrated, and she was saying, on Hanukkah you spoke about miracles, on Purim you said everything turns upside down, and Pesach you told us it's a holiday of freedom, and we've gone through holiday after holiday and it's not happening. And she was like having this crisis. How could we look at it? On the contrary, as far as Pesach, this is horrible to say, but as far as Pesach, it serves the narrative of the holiday. I'm not being, I don't mean to be cynical. It just, the major point is, one of the major points is, in Hebrew we say, Chayav Adam lirot atzmo kilu yatsa miMitzrayim. Every person should be able to envision themselves as if they were enslaved and they were redeemed. And it's interesting that when you look at manuscripts and the Maimonides and such, it becomes leharot et atzmo, meaning it's not just internalizing this feeling, but it's in some way externalizing it, almost playing in a theater in Pesach, pretending that everything is actually happening to you. And there's again a Maimonides notion that anything that happens to you firsthand, you'll probably, you'll hold on to it. You remember. I actually have my doubts about that, but we seem even when things seem to us like an unbelievable miracle, it's just like a very short moment until we consider them natural and whatever. But then he says it becomes a story, and a story is an endangered species. And it gets denied, and it gets forgotten, and it fades away, and it changes. And this. First of all, there's not much we can do against denying. The Rambam's approach, Maimonides, is we collect all the details in the verses and the places where people went through, and that somehow is supposed to solve the problem of not being able to deny. But you have places like Yad Vashem that hold on to every artifact and every testimony, and the deniers keep denying. And we had on October 8th, we had already deniers, and there's this very big building in New York that on the outside it says, I don't know the translation, but it says, Lo yisa goy el goy cherev velo yilmedun od milchama. It's a verse from this guy Isaiah, and inside the building they take resolutions that there's no connection between
the United Nations building. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that on your walls from the outside you have a quote from a Jew that lived around Jerusalem doesn't bother you inside to go ahead. What I mean is you can't keep it as a story. It has to
become real, is what you're saying.
It has to become real. It has to become an identity. There's this whole cute story, but it ends up with a quote from Avram Infeld, actually from his father, that says the Jewish people don't have a history, they have a memory. And what is a disadvantage in a court, that the story keeps on changing and every generation, every year experiences it differently, is an advantage as far as creating a memory and internalizing and asking yourself, okay, so what is Pesach this year different than last year? And the truth is that there's plenty of that. You look at this year, it's definitely different than 2 years ago, but it's even different from 1 year ago because we have all these narratives of hostages that were released, that went through this transition, and also the knowledge of who's there and they're not back, and even the descriptions of the kind of freedoms they kept while they were there. Almost like in the Shoah, the freedoms of the spirit, freedoms of identity. So it seems very cynical. I really, really don't mean that. But as far as the narrative of Pesach, it only makes it stronger.
It makes it stronger in terms of identifying to an extent, right, with what the holiday is meant to symbolize for Jewish people, because it's not some far away notion that we can't relate to. Because of these stories, we can actually almost see ourselves in the shoes. I don't know what they wore, the sandals of the Israelites as they were leaving Egypt back in the day, because we can think of maybe ourselves, and I think this was what October 7th was for at least everyone in Israel, was a moment that no one in this country didn't know someone either killed or kidnapped and abducted on that day, and definitely in the war since. So everyone, it was that person, but it could have been me, it could have been you, it could have been someone else, and
we were walking around feeling it could have been me.
So maybe that's is that what we should be thinking about to an extent?
So there are two issues I see here. One is you're supposed to see yourself as if you were in Egypt, but not historical Egypt, not only historical Egypt. The notion of enslavement and redemption and freedom, and what does freedom mean to me, and in what ways do I practice it, and what enslavement on a national level and a personal level means to me, and in what way do I practice it. And so it doesn't only help me imagine that experience, it helps me experience it today. That is also an ongoing idea in Jewish thought regarding Pesach, that there's a verse, El Motzia Mitzrayim, which is it's happening currently. It's an ongoing process. So holding on to that is an issue. But also, it's not just a matter of emotionally being able to connect. It's the ability to ask more intricate questions about the meaning of these things, and I don't know, facing it in our day-to-day reality.
But doesn't it also, to some extent, and maybe I'm reflecting my own personal thoughts here, But it creates a bit of a crisis of faith because, you see that, by the way, I think in Israel. Israel, a country that was established for never again as its kind of underlying slogan. Mm-hmm. And then comes a day called October 7th, where the most Jews were murdered on one single day since the Holocaust in the state of Israel, with the powerful military and capabilities and technology and economy that we have. And we weren't able to stop that from happening, and in the most brutal and vicious ways possible. But also, from a Jewish belief perspective, right? Just like people asked after the Shoah or during the Shoah, how could God let this happen? Well, here again, we're sitting at the seder table, and the God who took us out of Egypt is letting people, and I use that term loosely, but is letting people remain and languish in Hamas captivity. People are going to be asking those questions, are already asking those questions.
I mean, I find all the questions legitimate, and there are no magic answers to them. But personally, I think, first of all, that this is the world of free choice, and even huge processes like the Jews returning to Israel and building a sovereign state. They're followed by free choice that sometimes includes us becoming lax on defending ourselves, thinking that we live in some kind of different era, which unfortunately we don't, and free choice on the side of evil that decides to viciously attack. So what's God have to do with that? It's like, of course, to my mind, God has a lot to do with it, but a lot is left to us and to our choices. The issue of how can God let them it's like the general questions of suffering in the world and the existence of evil in the world. Give us 2 minutes and we'll solve it all. Basically, I don't know. On a personal level, I'll say no one promised me that this lifetime will be only smiles and roses. There is suffering, and sometimes in very, very unfortunate circumstances, there is extreme suffering. It is what it is. There's something.
It's learning to deal with it, I guess, to an extent, right? Learning to accept that, but accept the good and the bad at the same time.
Absolutely. I actually last night I met Rav Doron Peretz,
whose son was whose body is being held. Daniel is being held in was a tank commander near Nachal Oz, and fought bravely that day on October 7th, and then
saved dozens of people.
He was killed and taken.
Right, and it took many months until they found out he was killed, and we had that Pesach discussion with him, and there was some. There was this sentence that he's been using over a few months, saying it's okay, even though we know it's not okay, but it's okay. There's something about living and understanding this is life, even though it's so terribly un-okay. But he also spoke about yachatz, about the broken challah, matzah, and how this year it carries even more brokenness in it, but it's part of life. This is a very. I'm not trying to say, oh yeah, such extreme horrific things are just part of life. That's not what I'm saying. It's something we should do everything to climb out of, and the various solutions should constantly be tested. But on a spiritual level, the fact that life involves suffering. Is that it's just new? It's just more extreme. It's not new. There's something like childishly naive with the sentence. But how could you let it happen? Okay, I like this childish relationship because it's like a parenting situation. You say, but you should have taken care of me. Okay, fine. But I think accepting that things are more complicated and more difficult, and and who said they were meant to be all that different? It often gives you a lot of resilience.
So people have taken on a lot of customs ever since October 7th when it comes to the seder, leaving a chair like the cup of Elijah. The koshel Eliyahu is a symbol to Elijah's presence, but also a symbol of the hostages' presence or lack of presence at the seder, more accurately. But also telling stories about the hostages, reading about their stories. What do you? This is fine, right? This is encouraged. This is okay for people to do at a seder. I know a lot of people ask questions when it comes to, can you do new things, add new customs?
I think we started out with that. The idea is making it your own and passing it on to the next generations and helping them make it their own. That's the difference between history and memory. Okay? History might be a book on a shelf. Memory is identity, and it constantly changes, and you could argue with it, you could be inspired by it. It's part of who you are. And if our Pesach this year is identical to the Pesach before, like 2 years ago, that would be terrible in my eyes. I mean, this year we actually have a whole Saturday before Leila Seder, where I literally mean to reflect on, okay, so how is it different this year, and how is it different in practical terms and in spiritual terms? I just noticed that, I mean, it's been quite a few weeks, but planning Pesach brought me to understand that the two hostage pictures that were with us for a year and a half were both taken off over the last couple of months. Both didn't come home alive, and now it's Pesach, and we have to get new pictures. We can't have our seder when so many people are not home, and they have to be sitting with us. So for a couple of weeks, just seeing the wall bare, because every time one of them came back, we took off the picture. There was something that spoke to us in even more words than the picture itself. But now we have to reconnect, and yeah, definitely we're gonna add on whatever works out for us, and it becomes intertwined with this nation's long story. The idea is it's not a hostage Pesach. It's a Pesach that's one more year of this, some say, eternal quest, and every year it gets woven in with the current affairs.
I want to take it a little personal, if I can. It's almost 11 years now that your son Naftali was taken with two other teenagers in the summer of 2014, and taken by Hamas in the West Bank, and murdered, and took several weeks until his body and the others were found, and eventually led to another escalation in Gaza. But at the time, you stood out as a voice of, I think, not only moral clarity, but also of some optimism, even. But optimism on the sense of, we have to stand together and remain united as a people. And really, unity has become something of a message that you've carried with over the years. And I'm curious, since October 7th, I'm assuming you've met and spoken to a lot of families that have lost loved ones who came to you to probably hear, how do you move on? But so I want to ask kind of two questions here. One is, how do you move on? But two is, unity is so, I mean, I totally buy into that. The lack of unity also brought on October 7th to an extent, because we remember where we were October 6th. We were killing each other, not really, but fighting with one another about stupidity like judicial reform, which is important to a lot of people. And I think it's important too, but not something that you want to, when we divide ourselves, we give our enemy on a platter, on a silver platter, the opportunity to attack us. So two tough questions, but if you could try to give us something there.
Okay. Yes. there's something about the culture here that the ones that have some it's been a few years since they lost someone. Actually, they're almost routines of how to approach people and how to offer or be approached by others that are that their wound is so fresh and bleeding that sometimes they can't see beyond the next few days. It's ingrained in the culture, this notion. And what answers do I have? Mostly, it depends on the stage, but I speak about being able to accept support, and I've learned some amazing lessons about that. They usually come with long stories, but I don't want to trouble you now. But often the greatest gift you can give someone is being willing to receive from them. And that's a big deal. And we had no end of support in every possible imaginable circle. Another has to do with how people in Israel, they whenever there's a tragedy, they come, they look you in the eye, they say tiyu chazakim, be strong. And I feel deeply that it's more about flexibility than about strength. I mean, strength is important, but being flexible in your life to experience the joy, to experience the pain, to let room for the tears and for the frustration and for things that aren't going to happen, and to open the doors for the bracha, for the blessing, for the things that will happen, and not to deny one or the other. And you meet different kinds of people that go through different types of denial processes, where they either don't let themselves properly weep, or they don't let themselves properly laugh. So it's a lot about there's no different lifetime to grief and different lifetime to go ahead and enjoy the blessings. And practicing some kind of juggling act is a big deal. And there's also the issue of what you let define you. In other words, like my greatest mantra is, I can feel pain. I don't have to become my pain. I can feel sorrow. I don't have to become my sorrow. Like in my inner landscape, there's hopes and disappointments and successes and failures and pain and joy and lots of blessing. And yes, one could pick up a bucket of black paint and spill it all over their life. It's a personal decision. To me, letting one event, as painful as it is, define who I am and what my experience in this world is, it doesn't make sense to me, and things don't happen overnight, and people make their own choices, and don't let anybody decide, tell you what you're supposed to do. Just know you have options. People have very personal paths into such processes. And yeah, you go on, and there are things that could be said. Unity, yeah.
Because it was something that you spoke about already back then in 2014, mm-hmm. when we were, mm-hmm. were we as divided as we are today? I don't know. I mean, probably it was under the surface. We just didn't see it blowing up in our faces the way we saw it, let's say in the year of 2023. But all those underlying issues were there back then. And I think that in the hope, the campaign, the efforts to find Naftali and the others was this idea that you saw how the country came together. And you did see how the country came together after October 7th to an extent. But look at how quickly we fell apart again. It was almost as if, we know already that there's nothing like a good enemy to bring us together, but it doesn't last, right? Which just shows me that we have a serious problem.
We have a serious problem, and the enemy is still around, and we're already at each other's throat. And I don't envy you because you deal with the politics and you're constantly in that. I, from time to time, could decide not to listen to the news, which in Israel is like true rebellion. Yeah. It's like you don't have that benefit. There is an ongoing frustration, and every time you see the heights that we can reach in solidarity and in caring and in endangering our lives for each other, you become even more frustrated when you see the other types of energies. I'll say on a personal level and on a national level, I saw and we saw our capabilities, and it most of all, it stamped in me this understanding that under all of this, there underlies a true connection. When we were in the terrible Yom Kippur before Simchat Torah, okay, and people experienced both of these as traumas. Even Yom Kippur, that wasn't, it was before October 7th. It was a very traumatic day by the way we were treating each other and what went on. One of the voices was, let's separate. Okay, it will be Yehuda and Israel, and I think nobody toys with that idea again. Every stupid idea has a revival from time to time, but in the deeper sense, people became even more passionate about the disagreements because everybody realizes we're here to stay together. We can't afford to separate. We don't really wish to separate. And the passions, even when they're negative, are passions of, when a couple is really about to split, they want less and less to do with each other. And when a couple is yelling at each other, you're not enough this and you're not enough that, and I want from you more and more, they have a future. So yes, we have a serious problem, but as far as what the underlying tone, or not even tone, it's the deep reality, I'm totally convinced that the connections are stronger. There's sometimes images in my mind that I try to keep, like, I have to admit, Yair Golan is not my cup of tea, okay?
The head of the left-wing Democratim Party, as it's called now, correct?
Right. So on the years past, he said things that I thought were very damaging and very wrong. And where he is now, he says things that personally, I'm entitled to my personal opinions, are in my infuriating and wrong. But on October 7th, he walked into his closet, took out the uniform that he hasn't used for a few years. He was a general in the army, and drove straight into danger time and time again, knowing exactly where he's driving into and saving people from out of that place. And maybe on the other side, I can say when the people of Be'eri, Kibbutz Be'eri, had knocks on their doors and they were afraid to open because terrorists were identifying themselves as IDF soldiers, they asked, "What unit are you from?" And in some of the times, the answer was Otniel. Okay, there's no such unit. Otniel is actually a settlement, one of the more, I don't know if extreme, but
ideologically right wing, definitely. Yeah.
Very, very right wing, and the people of Be'eri are known to be as pacifist
very left
as
wing
can be. Yeah. Very left wing, and the guy knocking on their door, saving 100 of them, one of them being murdered, Elchanan Kalmanzon afterwards. They're the same people, the guy that drives me crazy and the guy that maybe drives them crazy, and then both willing to endanger their life to save people. There's a true sense of and a brotherhood would, but family. It's extended family, and we know that the worst fights happen in families. But there are images I personally hold on to navigate very frustrating days, and this is who we are. Personally, your wife is my boss, and we work in Batei Midrash. A Beit Midrash is a place where Jewish culture grew, Jewish religious discourse grew, and what you do there is argue, and you argue passionately. And bottom line, you only argue passionately with someone who you care about what his opinions are, not just the fact that he reflects on your future and your dreams, because he might think that your dreams are his nightmares. But that passion to me is very, it's Bet Midrash, it's who we are. So, then you start talking about machloket and how to handle machloket, and it becomes all very banal. But we have a lot to learn. But yes, I hold the optimism, because in the very important places, it usually shows up.
Yeah.
The connection, the caring, the solidarity, the willing to endanger the utmost for each other. And also,
an important message ahead of the Seder when families gather. Keep that in mind. Don't fight about the stupid political arguments that we have.
And sometimes it's better to keep politics out. But even if you do fight, remember that you're here because you're family. Yeah. And in a very general sense, I'm looking outward I have this bunch of fruit trees in my garden and beyond. And that's literally the prophets talking about the return of Israel and how the fruits and the trees will respond to them. So I literally feel I'm in a way living one step of that dream and prophecy. But beyond that, looking at Israel in the map of the global map, it feels like it's through the worst nightmares, and these are the worst nightmares, I feel it's like the only optimistic place on earth where children are being born, and in the Western world, okay? And I can't think of an act that's more optimistic than having a child. And families here, they're making that choice because they believe in that future. And you must know the numbers much more than me.
No, the fertility rate in this country is about 2.9 something, which is one of the highest, definitely, in the entire Western world, without a doubt.
But these, what I mean is, these are conscious people. It's not, it's not people that can't get contraceptives. Right. It's people that choose to build families
and to bring a child into this world. Correct. Despite all the challenges, as you said. Right.
Yes, and it's not it's not a child to they used to say bring children to overcome Hitler. Okay, no, it's not an ideological child. It's a child of love that you feel optimistic about their future. I don't know any vote that's more powerful than that.
Rachelle Sprecher-Fraenkel, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, for your words of wisdom and optimism in these tough times, and wishing you and your entire family a Chag Sameach, a happy Passover.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on today's podcast. As always, you can find this episode where podcasts can be found: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the website of Times of Israel. One word of housekeeping before I send you all off. We're going to be taking next week off for the week of Pesach, the week of Passover. And we'll be coming back right after the week of April 20th. But we'll be going to one podcast a week from two. So to those who have been listening, we thank you for listening to both podcasts. And we will still be here with you, but with one, maybe a little longer, hopefully a little better, but keeping up what we've been trying to do here ever since October 7th, which is telling the Jewish-Israeli story to all of you. Have a Chag Sameach.